Toot and Orberline would like to welcome you to How to Be Your Own Therapist with Miffi Maxmillion. You can find her at the Langri Tampa FTMP Center in Brisbane, Australia. Thank you, Miffi, for being with us today.
Oh, and thank you, Shayla, for being the hostess with the mostess. It's very nice to be here. I'm really thrilled to be continuing with this series of Be Your Own Therapist. And so I've been kind of skirting around just the topic of Be Your Own Therapist. So I thought what today we could talk about was, well, how do we even choose a therapist? You know, if we want a therapist, we've got to be our own therapist, but we also need some help. So what's the criteria for where we seek help? And even on a broader level, what's the criteria for who we can trust? So in the Buddhist tradition, we have a really wonderful, amazing checklist. The checklist is, what are the criteria of a valid refuge? So what can we put our refuge in? What can we trust in? How do we know what to believe in? Well, there's 4 things. It's a 4-point checklist, and it's dynamite. And it's dynamite that you can actually use it also for other things, like how to tell what medical system to put your trust in, how to tell what news to trust in, even what sporting team to join or art movement to engage in. This checklist keeps on giving, like it can be applied across everything. I thought it was really important to actually broach this subject of how do we know what to believe in? How can we have confidence in that? Because there's a lot of misinformation around, and there's a lot of dovetailing of religious communities and misinformation about COVID, about politics, and the wellness movement. And on social media, they've dovetailed, they've found this perfect medium where they cross over. Really unusual mixing of groups, but it's there. And faith-based communities are uniquely vulnerable because devotion and sincerity can leave you open to manipulation if it's not backed up with really sound reasoning and analysis. So with Buddhism, it's great because we have quite a unique culture of questioning and analysis that is built right into the belief structure. So there's kind of no room for blind faith in Buddhism, and in a way, there's no room for belief either. You make informed decisions, and as Venerable Rabina often says, working hypothesis. So that's what I thought we'd kind of start off with today. And so let's just take a moment to set our motivation and become present in the room, happy to be here, happy to focus our mind in this way for the next few amount of minutes, actually. And while we're getting settled, we can kind of bring to mind what we actually seek refuge in already. Where do we go for help? Who do we run to? What do we run to? Who do we trust? Then we can also take a moment just to think, have we ever lost our faith? Have we ever lost our trust? And just keeping those topics in mind, setting our motivation that today, as we go through this discussion, maybe we'll be able to unpick some of those things that happen and also get everything in line so that we can wholeheartedly have a valid refuge, have a trustworthy refuge, and then experience all the relief that comes from that. Being able to relax, as well as then being able to be undistracted and really progress along a spiritual path, become a better human being. And we have our motivation that we can read together. What is the purpose of being alive today? It must be something more important than drinking coffee. Today, I will develop bodhicitta, leading to the peaceful path of liberation and full awakening for the benefit of all beings. From this moment on until I go to sleep, I shall stay aware of every action of my body, speech, and mind. Wherever possible, I shall try to help, and at the very least, I will not harm. So we've set it all up nicely. I thought I'd just introduce the 4 qualities of a valid refuge, and then we can go a little bit deeper into it. So how do we know what to take refuge in or run to for help, for direction, safe direction, for guidance, for solace, for salvation, all of these things, because we have a natural impetus to take refuge. And, you know, our first refuge was mum, the universal cry, mama. And then after that, we might have got a little bit more sophisticated in our refuge. So from a Buddhist point of view, there are 4 main qualities, how we seek protection and guidance. So the first is fearlessness. So whatever our refuge is, they themselves must be free of fear, have freed themselves from all the fears of the world, of cyclic existence, freed themselves from the disturbing emotions, from delusions, and be fearless. Then that they're skilled, that they have a method to free others from all the fears of existence. So skilled at training others, skilled with methods to suit all the various dispositions of people, and can communicate in a way that resonates with us, that bridges all of those cultural gaps and gaps of difference and shyness. Then that they're compassionate, they have great compassion for everybody. So there's no favoritism, there's no bias. It's not just for me and my people or the chosen ones, but it's for everybody, whether they like me or don't like me, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant to be with, compassion for everyone. And then that they're pleased by practice, they're pleased by our efforts. That's the main thing that pleases them. So not pleased by how much money they get, and that becomes the main KPI, you know, not pleased by fame and being liked, or if the students are good students or bad students, but actually just pleased by the effort, by the practice put in. So they're the 4 main kind of characteristics that we should look out for when we're going to put our trust or faith in anything. Because many times we might do a little bit of an analysis, but then we go on a gut feeling, or we're sucked in by the hype and the charisma, by feeling good, or that it's really easy and we like this one, we like this idea. So all of those good feelings, it's okay to go by them, but we can't just leave it at that, just on going on feeling, because that's how really sincere people get sucked into cults, or get sucked into, you know, spurious medicine, or, you know, rip off vitamins, or, you know, whatever, chi machines. You know, there's really nice, really intelligent people that get sucked into that, not because they're not smart, but because what seems to be our defining characteristic of where we put our trust and faith is our feelings. And so the charisma part, but also maybe things happen and we go, oh, it was meant to be. So all of that is okay, but then we got to analyze and look underneath and go, well, why was it meant to be? What's the characteristics here? Why does it feel good? What's to back it up? And don't be frightened of that, because if we really analyze something, whatever's good about it will become even clearer. It's like when you've got, you know, a gold nugget or something, and you're purifying the gold, you're getting all the gunk out of it, all the dirt from around it, and just coming up with the gold. So analysis can't harm the truth. It can't harm a good thing. In fact, it'll make it shine even more brilliantly. And if under analysis and questioning, the whole thing falls apart, have a little cry and just leave it alone. It's okay for that to happen. Because otherwise, if we don't analyze, when things get difficult, we might have a crisis of faith. As well as the difficulty that arises, it may make us question everything about our faith, our direction in life. So then it's like this compounded problem that happens. So it's nothing worse than going through a crisis and losing your faith. I mean, that's really terrible, but that's often how people lose their faith, because if the faith is just based on a feeling or a belief, when it's really tested, it falls down, unless you've got really big heart. So anything come up yet? Has anyone gone through anything like this? Or questioned things, or really wondered, like, gee whiz, you know, am I on the right path? Or, yeah, Brian.
I think the 4 points you showed on the slide, I think what I would have thought would have been the easiest, I think is the hardest, and that's compassion, because I think we choose who deserves compassion. Like if it's such a bad person, or they're really bad, and that is the hardest thing. And for me, it's very hard.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And that's the ordinary way to go around to that. And we don't even consciously choose who deserves our compassion, but we have this idea of someone deserves and someone doesn't. So there's a huge amount of assumptions underneath that. And actually, that's going to be next week's topic, that exact thing of how to unpack all of that to get beyond just the apparent, you know, when we recognize suffering, usually then we feel compassion, unless we're brutalized. But generally, you see suffering, people's natural response is to feel compassion. But that's just the obvious suffering. So there's all the hidden suffering, or the suffering that's there but not that it's latent, it's not apparent at the time, and we forget that, and we forget people are under the control of all of their hopes and fears and worries and delusions and afflictive states of mind and emotions and hormones and diet, and then they do something stupid and we go, how very dare they, and because we can't see all that backstory. So yeah, it's a really good point, and that's why it's on the list, because it's a dead set giveaway. If people have favoritism or bias, that things in the long term can never work out. They're not going to work out well. So we'll go into that why in a moment. So really good. Okay, so let's, because I wanted to do them in order. So the first two, being fearless and being skilled. So when we're seeking a refuge, we're seeking a refuge of someone that that themselves has freed themselves. So it's like with our you know, our very best friends who would do anything for us, but they can't, can they? Because they're in the same boat as us. Like, they'd love to be able to help us, but they can't. Even with all the best will in the world, and you know, parents who see their kids go through all the, you know, the torments and humiliations of growing up, and they do anything to help them, but they can't. All you can do is kind of feel for them. So it's not enough just to have someone who has good intentions. They themselves have to be freed of those problems, and then have a way to share with others what they did. And see, that's what the Buddha did. You know, he went through all the same problems as us, actually in a very extreme way. You know, he went from being like the equivalent of an alpha male to an existential crisis, and then enduring the wrath of the entire community by leaving the ordinary society, everything that was good. Like, there's such an outrageous thing to do. And then just going headfirst with great courage into every single possible thing that showed any promise. So then not only was he able to liberate himself, but then he was able to share what he did. So that's the two crucial things. So the first thing, being able to heal yourself or liberate yourself. So even say when we're looking for good medical treatment, this is a way that we can bring it home to really ordinary examples. Is the person that's treating us, have they had any success? Are they healthy themselves? Are they keeping their patients healthy? So, if you, a while ago, I was recommended to go to a particular acupuncturist, and I found out the acupuncturist is actually a junkie and is dealing with, overcoming addiction. But that just made me think, no, I don't want to go to that acupuncturist. Like, fair enough, they're probably really sincere and they might be really good at their stuff, but I don't have trust. I don't have trust in that. And, if I go to a counselor and I find out that their own life is a mess, I'm not, even if they've got the best theory in the world, how can I trust them? And say when it comes to the media and where we get our information from, that's just the basic thing of, like, are they legitimate? Check their sources. When they make a quote, when they quote statistics, are they true? And in terms of the media, is the community that they serve and their community peaceful? Is the way that they're communicating the information, does it create community or does it destroy community? Because, the measure of any society really is how we treat our most vulnerable, not by how many people get to be millionaires or whether we can go to the moon or, all of those things. The measure of a society is what happens to the most vulnerable. So in terms of where we put our trust and our faith, we've got to look at that. How in the media, how do they treat the community that the media is describing, is reporting on? How is the what's that whole value system there? And we can look straight to how do they write up about the vulnerable? The other thing too about being free of all fears oneself, or whoever we put our trust in, being free of fears, is that they are fearless in being in saying the truth. So that means being able to speak truth to power, to be able to say the uncomfortable things, regardless of what happens to you, regardless of whether you're liked or not. So, like whistleblowers who go through a huge amount of distress and often their own lives are destroyed, but they'll do that because they're fearless. Of course, it's not. Oh, yeah. Sorry. What, Shayla?
For me, when choosing a therapist, fearless actually is at face value something that I look for. Somebody who, when I talk about blood and guts, doesn't blink, doesn't, panic.
Yeah.
Somebody who's, can handle what I've experienced in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because you don't want to go to a therapist and be trying to protect them from being distressed.
And I have before. So.
And see, that's right. So if you go to a therapist and they are distressed by what you're saying, it's like that movie Precious, that incredible American, story. And there's one part in there where she's talking to the therapist and she's going, you can't handle what's happened to me. I can't even tell you. So that's not fearlessness. And so that's not someone someone who hasn't even had not necessarily been through those experiences, but had the courage to go through it in your mind, to understand it, to delve all the way in, to get real insight into it. You have to have done the work yourself, basically. Yeah, very true. Barbara.
Yeah, I think that, these are wonderful qualities, but Buddha did not leave his luxurious lifestyle and then have all the answers the next day. He went through a lot of things, and I feel like a therapist or a doctor who has been sick is going to be more compassionate and is going to understand what illness is from a subjective perspective. And the same is true with with therapists or anybody who is going to kind of be my guide in anything. So while I would not want a therapist to be, high while they're treating me, I certainly would not eliminate them. I certainly wouldn't sit in judgment of their life and go, oh, your life is a mess, I don't want to come and see you. I would think maybe there's an opportunity to resonate with that.
Oh, you could get a bit more nuanced, I think, Barbara, because it's like if we're going to a therapist and they have that empathy for us of the whole mess, but if they haven't come out the other end and healed themselves, all they're going to be able to say to us is, yeah, it's awful, which is great. It's great to have company with misery, but I don't know what to do. And many people end up going to a therapist saying, I don't know how to help you. That's beyond my purview. I don't know what to do. So we want a therapist that's gone through the whole thing, just like us, and come out the other side. Because otherwise they're just our best friends, but they're not a refuge like that. They can't help us. So yeah, there's those 2 points. You've really nicely brought them out. Of both have gone through and done the work, gone through the torment, but also resolved it. That's why we're taking refuge in them, because all of us are going through that torment, right? But we want someone that can show us out. And so that's what's a valid refuge, because refuge, we expect something, we expect help. And often this is why friendships break up, because we expect help from our friends or from our parents, and then we're devastated when they can't help us. We feel like they've let us down or betrayed us, but it's actually they're just being a fallible human being like us. So in fact, that's almost like our fault for taking refuge in someone that can't give us refuge. They can give us company, but refuge being safe direction, guidance, protection, big things like that. So we've got fearless, being fearless. Being free from all faults and fear, having the power and ability to fearlessly help others. So there's a couple of nuances in there, but the main thing of actually having freed themselves from the problems that we are seeking to free ourselves from. And then the next one that goes closely with that is being skilled. So an expert in all the techniques of protecting and saving others. So being actually really skilled in giving us practical, what can we do right now, when to do it, the right information for the right person. And just like, a therapist won't say the same things to everybody. They'll be quite different what they say to each person. And like Lama Zopa Rinpoche's amazing book, Dear Lama Zopa, like the Dorothy Dix of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And it's great because you'll have these questions from all different people, but the same question, and then 3 completely different answers to the same question from Rinpoche, because it's 3 completely different people. So to actually have that skill to be able to tell exactly what method and when. So the ability to free others. And you might find that there are many self-help groups and communities that meet that have that first one of fearlessness. They might have the other ones of the compassion and caring for others, but they're just making it up as they go along. So the methods they use can be quite dubious, and they might just work because of the sincerity of the people, not thanks to the method. And so again, you can go wrong if you leave this one out of, does the method actually work to give me the result that I want? Because if it doesn't, it's not a valid refuge. It's more like just company. From a medical point of view, it would be, do they actually have qualifications, and are they good at their job? Is there anybody that has been healed? Have they got a good track record? Like if you get booked in for surgery, people always say, oh, I've got the best surgeon in Queensland, or I've got a really good surgeon. So what does that mean? That they are good at what they do. And that's what you want. From a medical point of view, it would be that we look, is it evidence-based? Not is it just a nice sounding idea? Like so much in the tradition of Western psychology has just been ideas that people have floated out. And some of them really destructive, detrimental ideas. And some of them totally wrong ideas, but they ended up helping through the sincerity of the people. But the whole thing of having evidence-based, counseling or psychiatry or evidence-based mindfulness techniques or evidence, then there is a way of checking it out. I mean, the importance of having someone who's skilled is, how disconcerting is it if you go to your therapist or your psychiatrist and they're like, oh yeah, well, let's just try you on these drugs and see how they go. And it's like, that must be the most distressing sentences in the human language. It's like, just try me on this means here we go, another 1 to 2 months of roller coaster up and down torment and confusion just to see how it goes. And you're the doctor? I don't think so. Like, that's hard work, isn't it? So luckily with Buddhist psychology, it's really clear. These are the remedies for these afflictions. These are the remedies for these disturbing emotions. And this is the whole import of the Buddha's teachings, is about recognizing the suffering, the sickness, and then finding the root cause. And if you deal with that, the sickness is gone. That's it. So there's actually an enormous amount of certainty in that, and it is evidence-based. So yearning for a solution like that is fine. Don't ever give up your yearning. This checklist is just to make sure that we alight on the right thing, whether it's a spiritual path, the way out of suffering, whether it's good medicine, whether it's the media. So the media, it's got to be, is it skilled analysis, skilled reasoning? Many times we lose our rationality when we're upset. And so many times a lot of what comes from the media is emotion-based, and a lot of magical thinking, a lot of, just say we care about others and therefore we do care about others. Saying it's not going to do it, we need to have some evidence. There's one thing that really gets me at the moment. There's an ad on Australian TV, and it's probably reused throughout the world, where it goes, us Queenslanders, we're always there for each other. We always care about others. That's just us. That's just what we do. And then sometimes if there's a national emergency with fires or floods, we'll go, we Australians, we're always there for each other. That's what Australians do. Do you have that in America? Is that what you say about us Americans? Or us Arizonians? We're band together. We've got, so everybody takes it like, just by saying that and identifying with that as a trope, that it's true. But actually, like every time they say, oh, we Queenslanders, we look after our own in a disaster. I just think, well, no, we don't. There was no help that went to the people in the floods. There was, you know, it was just the neighbours in their little tinnies going around saving people off the roofs. There was no help to give them anywhere to live. There was no help for the refugees. The homeless and the unemployed are disparaged as if it's their fault. You know, all of this stuff. Actually, it's not true. But what happens is that the media being so playing on our emotions, just by us saying, oh, us Queenslanders, we always look after each other, then everybody gets to feel good. So it's emotive reasoning, but it's not based in fact. And because of that, it leads us astray and it causes us to unintentionally harm others. And so, you know, when we're looking at, well, what do we put our trust in? Just people saying, you know, just trust me, we're the best one. We got to look, are they the best one? Where's the evidence in there? And I don't know why I thought of it, but there's also, like with the media being skilled in presenting information, I mean, the best way actually to present really confronting information is with humor. And that, I mean, that's why we have comedy shows. Heaps of comedy shows are really radical, aren't they? And they can say stuff and get away with it that a politician would never be able to, that a teacher would never be able to. And so I remember, like in Melbourne, they had, for years and years, they had the annual Architects Review, and it was a comedy show put on by the architect department at Melbourne Uni. And that's where all these famous comedians came out of, including Dame Edna Everage. And they were super radical and highly political, but because it was so funny, it just slipped in. So that's being really skilled. What else? I was just watching James Cameron's The History of Sci-Fi last night, and he was saying, you know, in the time where there was a lot of censorship about, you know, McCarthyism, of heaps of censorship within the movies and books too. And so I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy who did The Twilight Zone. So he was really highly censored in some books that he wrote, and he was so devastated about that. And then he realized, this is how I can talk about it, through science fiction. So he could say everything that he wanted to about politics, race, gender, and just couch it in The Twilight Zone, in sci-fi. And it completely slipped in for years. But that's why it's such an amazing show, because it was so much, it wasn't, the whole purpose wasn't sci-fi. The whole purpose was, let's skillfully communicate these things. Is anyone a fan of The Twilight Zone? Did you grow up with The Twilight Zone? Yeah, right, good-o. I was terrified. So being skilled. Questions, comments? Okay. Then we've got the next two. So those two kind of go nicely together. The next two, so great compassion. This is like the sun, you know, the sun shines equally on all. It shines on the mud, on the rubbish, on the beautiful daisies, on the sparkling clear water, without favoritism, without bias, liberates all, brings light and warmth to all. And all of those things, they can't harm the sun, can they? So great compassion, being completely bound by great compassion. A Buddha does not discriminate between beings. So we could think, you know, a valid refuge does not discriminate between beings. And Brian, this is really what comes down to what you were talking about, how it seems the most simple, but is actually the hardest in practice. Because being unbiased, aiming to help everybody. So for a valid spiritual path, something that we really put our whole well-being in, like that, our inner well-being. Whether as Buddhist or not, we've got to look, are they inclusive? How do they treat the vulnerable, the old, the sick, the ones of other race, the ones of other religion? That's really telling. So, because even if you have the most compassion, if you have incredible good-heartedness and compassion for me and my people, if it's biased, your compassion can lead to conflict. I mean, this is the really scary thing, that if our compassion is just for me and mine and not those ones, or even if it's just for me and mine and doesn't notice those, isn't just, completely aggressive towards them, but it means that we're not caring for those. And it means, therefore, at best, we'll just accidentally harm them. And at worst, we'll feel quite happy to harm them. And we'll harm them if our lot are threatened. So that biased compassion is what leads to war. That's why wars are perpetrated. People go and they put their lives on the line. But it's mixed, isn't it? Because it's mixed. Half of it is protecting me and mine, and the other half is destroying the enemy. And that's biased compassion, because you just got compassion for one side. You're not looking for a solution for everybody. So anyone who has just compassion for their own group, their own tribe, and not others, we've got to be so careful of, really steer clear of. So you can go straight to, well, how do they treat the others? That's your litmus test. And I'm so heartened how in the Buddhist doctrine it says part of the vows is to not disparage other religions. Part of the refuge vow is to not disparage other religions, to not speak badly of other religions. You can speak out about, behaviors and, various things, but we can't disparage another religion, because it's not one size fits all. And, all the major world religions have compassion at their heart. Some of it's biased, sure, but they do have compassion at their heart. So we can't disparage the whole religion. Then also you look at, well, how are the baddies treated? So, or the others, the other, that sense of the other. So whether it's people from another culture, whether it's LGBTQIA++, how are those that we feel are different from us, how are they treated? With respect, equal respect? Or they're wrong, so they don't matter? So you really quickly sort everything out then, and not just a religious movement, but schools, art movements, sporting codes. It's pretty clear. What else? With medical thing. Okay, so this is where we expect our professionals to be professional. So doctors, surgeons, nurses, we expect them to treat everybody equally and with equal care. Teachers, we expect them to treat all the kids in the class with equal care, not just teach the ones they like and leave out the ones they don't. This is like just basic professionalism that we expect. So I remember this amazing story I was reading about in America, in the South, in the time of maybe like the 50s, and where there was still really prevalent Ku Klux Klan activity, and there was particular riot and lynching and terrible things happening, and a lot of people were injured. And at the hospital, the bulk of the staff in the emergency unit are black nurses. And so here comes a wounded Ku Klux Klansman on the trolley, coming with the ambulance, still in the white sheet, on the trolley, blood everywhere. And all of those nurses, they just dove in and helped him, and they saved his life, because their inner professionalism really was completely integrated. Under the skin, we're all the same. Here is a person bleeding out and dying. Our job is to help, and they did. I mean, you know, that's not just intellectual, is it? That's really something. And yet we expect that of everyone, you know, with professional services. And of course, I'm not sure what happened, but like that Ku Klux Klansman would have felt differently after that about Black people. That you just couldn't help it. Everything would have changed. And so that is actually the way to create change in our society, isn't it? We can't force people to be nice, but it's a really big ask. I mean, it's such a confronting and inspiring and devastating story. So yes, seeing below the skin to our common humanity, despite the harm given. And so whoever we take refuge in has to have that quality. Or even if they're good and they're good at what they do, somewhere along the line it's going to lead to conflict. With the media, when it's, you know, where do we put our trust in our information? We've got to see, are they seeking to benefit everybody, or are they just kind of biased towards a select group? So that kind of comes in with the hidden interests then, the hidden agenda. There is a thing with the dovetailing of the right-wing politics and the wellness industry, where we all have this wish to feel like we've got inside information, special information. And this gives us a sense of importance and status and security. And so that's why the whole, you know, the conspiracy theories just take off, because they're emotion-based, of feeling special with the inside info. And so that has this terrible side effect of distancing you from others. There's us who know, and there's you who don't. And because it's emotion-based, the result is I care about us and I don't care about you. It's not about education, is it? Conspiracy theories is about holding the information. It's not about sharing and looking after everybody. So again, we can start going, aha, where does this information go? Where is it great compassion for everybody, or just for me and mine, the select group? So I find it a very powerful analytical tool, this one. And the other one, so that's the great compassion. And then we have, very closely aligned with that, being pleased with your practice. So working for the benefit of others, regardless of whether they've benefited them in the past or not, regardless whether the students bring you presents, regardless whether you have money that you can pay for all of this. So not motivated by, I'm going to do this one because I get heaps more money than if I do that one. Rather motivated by the people putting in the effort and doing the practice. And this one also I find so incredibly useful, because I look at even, pardon me, even you know, really expensive, you know, doctors, lawyers, surgeons, the really good ones have a whole section of pro bono work, don't they? So it's okay to charge heaps of money, but there is this sense of offering pro bono work for something that really matters for people that can't actually pay. So that's a really good one to go and see. Do they do pro bono work? So Eddie, who teaches here and who's also taught at Thupten Norbuling, he, as a boy, he had allergies. Like, I think he was like the most allergic boy in the whole South Island of New Zealand. Like, and all of these, you know, a real difficulty in breathing. Anyway, finally, there was one of the students here who offered to pay for a nose operation because he had polyps in his nose. And so it was just to kind of investigate what was going on, so to see why he can't breathe. And then I think the money that they had was just to do like one side of the nose. Anyway, so Eddie went off to the operation and came back, you know, that day. And the doctor had said, well, we looked up his nose and it was like the Great Barrier Reef up there. It was just like, oh my God. So we just did the whole thing. We just cleaned his whole beautiful, gorgeous nose out. And it's okay, don't worry about it. And just gave half the surgery free, just like that. You know, so that's the mark of someone like a really good surgeon and someone who really cares, not in it for the money, just the money. So the other thing, of course, like when we look at our surgeons and doctors or psychiatrists, like which drug company are they being paid by? Follow the money. It's just that simple. Follow the money. How many drug company cruises have they been on lately? That's really the easiest one. It's the easiest one also with the media. So follow the money. And that's actually what really good journalists do. They just follow the money. And then you find where the hidden agenda is. And then you find what's the values motivating it here. Money, power, fame, status, all of those things, or actually education, healing others. The other thing, of course, of being pleased with practice is that means that it doesn't matter whether you're popular or not, and so also when we're going to teachings, we shouldn't just base it on whether that that teacher is popular or not. Because I mean, half the stuff on a spiritual path is inspiring and joyful, and the other half is really difficult. And so if we just see that all that person is doing is just giving us the nice stuff so that they're liked, that's also not trustworthy, is it? It kind of comes back to that fearlessness of they're fearless to be able to actually share the difficult things and the truth, and then they're really pleased when you struggle on and you battle through and it might be really difficult. And so yeah, they mightn't be praised or liked for that at all. They mightn't be very flashy. You know, it might just be the hard yards, but actually that's a valid refuge. And then they're pleased with our practice. So they're not necessarily pleased with us, you know, always having a wonderful experience to share. They're pleased with our effort. Even if we're a mess, they're pleased with our effort. So that's a really telling one as well. And then naturally we develop a sense of trust in them too. Because, you know, many times I think why we're so shy of our precious lamas and geshis is because we just want to show our good side to them. And we think if we show all of our confusions and ridiculousness, they won't like us anymore. But that's not true. They love us and care for us, warts and all, actually more than we love or care for ourselves. And that's that mark of a valid refuge, is that they care about you even though you're a mess, even though you're screwed up, even though you've done some terrible, awful things. They still care about you. So does that make sense? Does it give you some more kind of ways to look at where you put your trust or faith? Barbara, yeah.
So I'm a bit of a contrarian here.
Oh yeah, go for it. Please do.
So more and more we're finding out, at least in the US, that the medical system that a white person or a male interfaces with is completely different than what a person of color, or more specifically a black person, interfaces with. So, like, the data show that black physicians have better outcomes with their patients across all races than white physicians. So that's kind of on the the giving end, but
Yeah.
also on the receiving end, if you're black, and I think also the data are leaning toward women of any race, that you're less likely to get pain medication. You're more likely to be what they call medically gaslighted.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. Yep, yep, yep.
so when I go to a physician, or any professional, that we're all affected here by this these institutional biases, and so when I'm going and seeking refuge in a professional, what is my responsibility as trying to be a good moral person to understand the bigger picture of where this person is kind of located in correcting these biases?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a universal problem, isn't it? Because we've had similar studies in Australia, and another kind of nuanced one is like parents, when they bring their kids in, the parents are gaslighted that they're all just being overly dramatic, but actually the kids are really, really sick, and the doctors aren't listening to the parents' insight of their ill. So a similar kind of thing of and it's pride that is dismissive of others, and can't get the information. Pride that thinks I know better or I'm more important. And it's not even intellectual pride, it's really, really deep, where others don't matter as much. So actually, if you have pride, if you are an alpha male, white, middle class, Anglo-Saxon male doctor, there is no incentive for you to get over that. In fact, the incentive is just to treat your own, because that's where most of the money is. So it's actually really difficult for someone in that position of power to educate themselves, or to even become aware that something's wrong. So when we have entitlement, we don't know, like I don't know I have entitlement, but I can infer I do, because even though I'm a woman, so that's, gets the oppression, I'm white, so that gets the free pass. And so I can infer that I have some unknown entitlement, probably a whole lot of racism that I don't know that I have, and all of this, but I'm open to learn, and I would rather know the cold hard truth than to be done with it. But I must say, like, Barbara, when I was living in Melbourne, the doctors that I ended up going to were the ones that were a doctor's practice set up for sex worker community and those with HIV/AIDS, because I knew they wouldn't judge me and they would listen to me. And so I picked them. That's who I went to. And I also know people that when they're going to find a car mechanic, they just go and find the LGBT car mechanics, because they know they're not going to get ripped off. So, we can actually, if we've got the opportunity, we can go looking for someone where there's evidence-based proof that they care for the vulnerable, and they care about the job that they're doing.
That's a really good suggestion. Thank you. Because supporting somebody who's already supporting the community, vulnerable
Yeah.
communities, and by that, you're also supporting those vulnerable communities. Thank you. That was actually very inspiring, and I appreciate it.
Oh, good. So I'm not so sure, like, if the LGBTQ community is happy that then, like a straight white woman's coming in and, using their services. But yes, like you say, happy to support where possible. And then also, from our side, I think, just as a sideline, like if we do come across racism or entitlement and everything, and we'll probably talk about this more next week in terms of like compassion, to recognize that those people, while they're in a position of power, they're also in a prison. And it's just that the results of that prison for them are going to come much later. and the oppressors do untold damage without kind of knowing or without anybody being able to stop them. So the way for us is actually like we've got to become a refuge. So we have to have great compassion and be unbiased and no favoritism. We have to be willing to help the harmers as well as the victims, and we have to be willing to share and educate when the opportunity arises at a dinner party or whatever, or on a comedy skit to actually try and remedy these situations. Because that's the thing too, in the end, we find a valid refuge, we travel the path, and then we achieve that refuge and we become a refuge for others. That's kind of what we're aiming at. So thank you, Barbara. That's a really excellent point, and I'm glad you brought it up. The last thing I wanted to share with you was inspired or just going crazy. So this is kind of how I wanted to sum it up, of how can we tell if what we're doing is, we're really dedicated, we're 100% involved in what we're doing. Are we like working really, really well or really inspired? Because, when you write into something, you drop everything else. Sometimes the meta-analysis, you're just going for it. Are we on the right track? Or are we completely self-deluded and going nuts? And how can we tell? So when this is a question that came up for me, like, because running a Dharma Centers program is pretty intense, pretty full on. You've got to really have the courage to go with it and dive in deep. And, leading visualizations or pujas and trying to make them come alive. How do I know that I'm making them come alive and not just bastardizing them or leading everybody astray? And this is like a thing that how do I check this up? So when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was last in Australia, it takes a long time for me to get a question. I think it's been years since I had a question, but I finally had a question. I'm like, yay, Rinpoche's here. I'm going to ask my question. So I asked my question straight away, like, after he'd given his introduction. Any questions? Like, yeah, me. So I asked my question and he said, he laughed. He said, good questions. So I'm like, oh, phew. There were lots of people in the room were like, what kind of question is that? Anyway, the answer he gave me was just dynamite. And this is it. This is the answer, folks. So one, everything arises from the Dharmakaya. And check with the Dharma. So this is it is the most amazing answer, because it's the two truths right there. First, everything, insanity, wisdom, it all arises from the Dharmakaya. How wonderful is that? And so just by saying that, it takes us to that perspective, the meta-analysis. And in terms of finding a valid refuge, what do we put our faith or trust in? The real refuge is your wisdom realizing the ultimate nature. And then, so that's the context. Then, within that context, check with the Dharma. So things like, is what we're doing or what they're doing against the law? Are they going against the law of the land? Is it against your refuge vows? Is it against your marriage vows or your citizenship vows or avoiding the 10 non-virtues? Just real basic stuff. Check with the Dharma. Is there a scriptural reference? Can we find a valid reference to go back to check out more? And every good teacher, art movement, politician, you name it, they will always quote their sources and their mentors and say, you should check out this person. They're really amazing. They helped me so much. So check scriptural reference, any kind of reference. if people say, here, you can check out more here, that is great. That's really brilliant. And then checking with the Dharma also means checking, is it interpretive or definitive? So that means, is the information that I'm getting to be taken literally? Or does it need some unpacking? Is it metaphorical? Is it an analysis, an analogy? So it's so nice, isn't it? Everything arises from the Dharmakaya, and then check with the Dharma. And so that one means basically, don't just believe what you want to hear or what's nice or what you like. And that's really what we do. That's what all the social media algorithms are based on, is just feeding us what we want more of, not what's better for us. So don't just kind of investigate the things that you agree with or that you like. Go and investigate, like Barbara, you know, being contrary. Go and investigate the other side of things so that you know this is a really good skill. Bring out your inner skeptic, because that can only help us. And then, you know, don't defriend the ones that you don't agree with or don't like, because then we've closed the relationship, and how are we going to help them? When we make our decision, it can't just be on what feels nice or what we agree with or what we like. It's got to be on much more than that. And I mean, all the social media algorithms are actually calibrated to give us more of what we want, and what we want is conflict. That's what everybody's drawn to. They're not drawn to peace and calm. They're not drawn to in-depth analysis. They're not drawn to uncomfortable truths. They're drawn to conflict and dissension and lust and power and all of these things. So that just dishes up more and more confusion. So even our social media is biased that way. So checking with the Dharma helps to put a lid on that. All right, so I've gone over as usual. We better dedicate. So let's dedicate. So that the benefits of actually then finding a valid refuge, one that we really know why we're going in this direction, that we can trust, is that we can relax. We don't have to be riven with uncertainty and anxiety anymore. And our path becomes clearer. It's easier to see where we're going and what we're doing. And we become a better human being. So, and in a way, we're protected from suffering. You know, we're protected from the confusion and the angst that comes along with problems. We still have problems, but we're protected from all that, you know, inner churning. And so we know we've got it right when we stop actually focusing on the faults of others, and start kind of finding what we have in common, what brings us together. So let's dedicate for that. Let's dedicate that we can find a valid refuge, and that we have the courage to analyze it and find out exactly why, as well as having the good feeling. And then naturally we'll be able to have the benefits of following a valid refuge. So here's the dedication. Due to all the merits of the 3 times accumulated by me and by others, merely by seeing, hearing, remembering, touching, or talking to me, may any being be freed in that very second from all their sufferings, diseases, spirit harms, negative karmas, and obscurations, and abide in the peerless happiness of full enlightenment forever. So thank you so much for coming along, your attention, your questions, your comments. I hope you have a super interesting week. And see you next week. We're going to continue on with the compassion thing. Take care, everyone.